Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you all to today's session on design thinking, a topic that redefines how we approach problem solving and innovation. This session isn't just about learning, it's about experiencing a mindset shift that empowers educators like us to think differently, act purposely, and create a lasting impact. And to guide us on this particular transformative journey, I would say we are thrilled to have none other than Mr. Sandeep Bidani sir with us. Sandeep sir is a renowned CHRO and CXO with an illustrious career spanning 25 years across global organizations like IBM, KPMG, American Express, and whatnot. As a change consultant, he has been instrumental in helping leaders and organizations stay relevant in today's rapidly evolving world. He is also an executive coach and inclusion catalyst and India's first PWD HR leader. Sandeep sir, we are all excited to hear your insights and learn how design thinking can revolutionize education. Over to you, sir. Please take the
Thank you so
center
much.
stage and inspire us. Thank
Thanks,
you, sir.
Siddhant. Thank you so much. And ma'am, thanks for the opportunity to share some learnings with the academia. Of course, any such opportunity tends to help me a lot also. Go back and reflect, starting to reflect. I think, and Siddhant, thanks for highlighting career and all of that. And I go back to, how, a lot of things that are called design thinking today were at times called creative thinking. They've been called various things at various stages of our careers. So I started out as a mechanical engineer, and I remember my first job was designing machine parts at Aisha, which used to be, which still is a very large organization in the automobile space. And I reflect back on my days as an engineer, and when I moved to consulting, which is after my MBA in HR. It took me to HR and I started with consulting. A lot of the projects that I did were in manufacturing environments, so oil and gas, water desalination, um, you know, aluminum refining, and I was looking at things like job descriptions of people. I was looking at roles of people. I was looking at what were they accountable for on delivery. And Because I had a background where I had understood operations, I could understand linkages, I could understand how to think out of the box at times. I realized that I was able to look at various aspects of data information and start connecting it to, let's say, productivity. Now, the learnings that emerge out of that experience is that a lot of times there are different points of data or information that is lying in different areas, but your ability to bring them together and stitch them together into solutions that are applicable is possibly the most important skill set that was necessary. And as we go deeper, that skill is only getting more important. um, Concept learning, rote learning. There have been various ways that we went through. But finally, where the rubber meets the road, an organization needs to gain something out of that application. And I reflect back when we were looking at people and performance, it was very easy for us to start looking at matrices that related to production or maintenance or other things and start linking it to people. Say, if this is happening, then these people are doing well or not. And how do we start defining how they're doing well? So there was a correlation that we could establish. So that's been a bit of the journey. And, obviously, design thinking has evolved over a period. So what is design thinking? I think the element is it's not rocket science for sure. It's not a lot of science also. It is primarily a very simple human-centered approach to problem solving. How do we as human beings solve problems? Many of this actually sits in our subconscious mind. and how we bring it out from our subconscious into a conscious structured approach is really the whole element of design thinking. And most of our approaches that we learn are honed through our experiences. What we are trying to achieve here is to converge all of that and say how will we solve for problems, and have we taken in all aspects so that we are successful when we solve that problem. How do we start applying various aspects of information, data, validation, all of that, and start using it? Now, why are we talking about this and education? And as we look at it more so, you'll find that in education, uh, in the real world, challenges are fairly complex. Students that are passing out from various levels, whether it is school, grad level, MBA schools, and all, the challenges that await them are getting more and more complex. Organizations have become complex. Post COVID, many organizations are working remote. Um, uh, Managers are struggling to manage teams that are remotely located and not co-located. There are biases that are coming in, and a lot of that gets managed because there is logical thinking and data that exists. So that helps leaders in being more effective. And as people get into workspaces, they are given very complex situations and at times not 100% guidance. It is expected that they should be smart enough to go figure, as the current generation likes to say, go figure. And and are we preparing this generation to go figure? That's how I tend to look at it. So I have a 25-year-old at home, and I know that a lot of go figure conversations happen. And I tend to encourage them to say, okay, go research, go figure. And uh, and and that's how a lot of this emerges. The other is, are we developing critical thinking skills? The what if scenarios, the use of what we call the W model, which is what, where, when, what if, and all those are getting very, very critical in the learning space, because that's where application happens, true application happens. And that is actually creating the shift from traditional learning to what we call experiential learning that can be applied to find solutions. So that's the shift that we are seeing emerging across. Um, Now, there is, and there are studies, and I'll share a bit of data around that. There is significant impact on students' skills when we use design thinking. And there are three core aspects that are emerging. One, of course, is creativity and innovation. Thinking beyond conventional ideas, unique solutions. Now, the solution may look different from what we may have experienced at a point in time. At times, the biggest limitation also is it may look different from what we expected, because there is something that we expect at times when we are educators. That happens with us at times when I'm facilitating a conversation with a set of leaders. And what we expect, we get a very different, distinct answer, which is very powerful. So I've realized that from every leadership training session also, I come back more enriched, because somebody will bring a very different perspective. So right from the beginning, this becomes a very important aspect. The other is, people, and specifically students, at times get very overwhelmed. The complex problem seems very large, and when they walk into workspaces, it seems very overwhelming. There are rules, there are policies, there are guidelines, and there is ambiguity. Every day there is ambiguity. In all of that, how do they learn to break this large issue into bite size problems that can be solved in little bits, and then connecting the dots? That's a very, very critical skill that design thinking is able to solve. And the third element is, How do you do iterative problem solving? So creating iterations. Now, if you look at it as a leadership skill or a world skill, we say, and we say that in a lot of corporates, managers say that to their teams, do not come to me with a problem. When you come to me, also bring with a couple of alternate solutions, and then let's talk. If that's the expectation at workplace, when are we building that capability? And that's the correlation that we need to continuously establish, that that's not something that's by design taught, but we need to start doing that. And that at times is built more around the time when people get into professional courses where literal thinking and topics like that are taught. But it can be embedded. And the third is that, and looking at India and the India story right now, a lot of youngsters are looking forward to becoming entrepreneurs. There is recent data of B schools in the US, and it's very interesting that A, of course, placements are down because there is a general recession. But a lot of youngsters are opting to go and become first time entrepreneurs. And there are lots of incubators that are emerging, which will enable that. But the moment they step out of a school environment or they get into professional courses, the biggest thing that we may not have taught is risk taking. What if you fail? How do you rebound from that? How do you step back and look at, okay, in this failure, what are the three things that I learned? What do I need to focus on? Is it the overall issue, or there is a small component of the solution that did not work? The moment we build that capability, it just gets better, which means they start approaching solutions with a business oriented approach. And the government is doing a lot. Very interestingly, the Delhi government had created a whole program working with the government schools where they had mentors like me to work with startup and youngsters who had startup ideas, and many of them got seed funded by the government. And that is the future that we continue to see emerging. So if you look at this, what is emerging out there, we're just preparing for that future. There are some research findings as well on design thinking. And one of the research findings said that Meta did an analysis of 25 articles on student learning, and Meta did their own analysis, and they realized that there is a direct correlation and a direct positive impact on design thinking in education. So they started looking at it. The second is there is a lot of interest in incorporating design thinking into schools. And most studies are saying that we need to start targeting middle school for this, not 11th and 12th alone. And a lot of leaders that I speak with, at times there is a conversation that, okay, and then there are empirical studies that show that there is clear correlation between design thinking and creativity and critical thinking. So again, there are some of these documents are available. I'll be happy to share the links if you'd like to read more around it. Um Even in India, there has been some policy level discussion on how this can be brought in, but I don't know how much implementation has really happened. So we'd like to see that. But before we move forward, let us try and answer one particular question and then we will come back.
So, all the educators, we are again introducing a very new platform named Slido. I think you would have gone through with it, but what's new with this particular platform is that again, in the chat box, you will be receiving a slide link that you just need to click, and once the presenter is gonna present that particular question, you just need to drop your answers. So the quiz link is in the chat box with the question: which of the following best reflects the core of design thinking in an educational context? The link is in the chat box. So once everyone will join this particular quiz forum, it's like Bini Diwan, Jayashri, and I think we are expecting at least 25, and then we're going to initiate this particular quiz. So you just have to drop your names first, and then we will initiate it. So great. So far, so good, I would say. Lovely. We have reached 18. So I think 25 would be something, or 20, let's see, because we have some devices also. So yeah, well, let's keep it at 19 then. Okay, 20. Lovely. So let me initiate the quiz then for you guys. So now the quiz would be activated and it would be in front of your screen. You just have to click on the correct answer and you have 20 seconds for that. I would say 15 now. Uh, 10, 9, over to you guys. Time's up. And within heavy margin of about 15 educators, they have answered option B. Over to you, sir. That is encouraging students to explore.
So, just to continue, before we go into the next set of conversations, I will be happy to share some content if you'd like to read more about future of skills. But the most recent World Economic Forum report, 2025, which actually studies talent trends and skill trends till 2024, projecting into 2020, 2030. So 25 to 2030, what are the skills going to look like? And the future needs that are emerging are very interesting. Now, one could say that we are focusing a lot on technology. I'll try and see if I can make this a little bigger. Just give me a second so that it's a little clearer when I present it. Okay. Okay. So let's look at some of the future skills that are emerging. And the essential part is that all of these are not technology-led skills. AI and big data, of course, we've been talking about it. Networks, cybersecurity, technology literacy. Now, technology literacy is not just a skill, it's an attitude. Being literate about technology means you are willing to learn, relearn, and constantly keep yourself updated. Many times people look at, technology literacy and say, yeah, yeah, I'm literate, I'm comfortable with technology. But that's not the way technology works. It is constantly getting replaced. Are you digitally native? And versus your technology savvy, there is a range. But that's an important thing that's emerging. But if you go just beyond that, the key skills and attitudes that are emerging and needed for the future are creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, and agility. What does that mean in the real world, in an organizational context, is what we need to start understanding and then correlate it to what can be done in a school environment. Creative thinking in a workplace is all about finding rapid solutions at times in a very ambiguous situation and then validating them. Agility is about testing those little solutions out, and if they don't work, quickly dropping it and moving to something else. Now, how do we and when do we build these capabilities in schools? That's what we need to start reflecting. Let's look at a few more. Resilience. Now, what does resilience mean? We all learned resilience from the post COVID era. During COVID, children learned it, teachers learned it. A lot of teachers who were not tech savvy were suddenly teaching online, were assessing kids online. There was a lot of learning for schools, there was a lot of learning for teachers. So you had to adapt, and that is resilience. But many times you would have also failed when you were setting that up and then come back. So start looking at it from that perspective. How are we building resilience? Is it okay to fail? Is it okay to try and fail and then go back and try again? Does the system allow for that retrial in a different manner? Is it built into the ecosystem to say, okay, this is an experiment and it may not work, but there is a X percentage probability that it will work, but it's something new that we are going to try out. That is the important conversation around resilience, flexibility, and agility in in both schools and workplaces. Curiosity and lifelong learning. Now, if that is a skill that's required as you go in from 2025 to 2030, and that's what the World Economic Forum looks at, if you look at it, these are increasing use cases. So there are decreasing use, there are stable use, and there are increasing use. All of these sit in increasing use. Curiosity and lifelong learning, leadership and social influence. Now, you could say leadership is about leading, but no. Leadership is also about collaboration, and design thinking is significantly about collaborating ideas, about trying to find solutions together, taking in different views. Again, if we look at it, analytical thinking is a significant part. Talent management, which is really managing others' expectations, managing teams, that happens later. But first is, are we able to work well with each other? All of these aspects are emerging as future skills. And that's where linking design thinking in education to what's needed in the future becomes very, very important. And there are many more here, which is around analytical thinking, environmental stewardship. A lot of schools are focusing on environmental stewardship, making students aware about the environment, the carbon footprint, what does net zero mean? A lot of those conversations have started. And in their own small ways, even younger children are exposed to keeping the environment clean. That's where it starts. But if you look at it, how is this becoming relevant in the future, even as a future skill? So there are industries where some of these skills have become more relevant or most relevant, and those are growth industries. So we'll talk about that. So I just wanted to bring this up and say that these are these are very critical aspects that are needed. And again, if you look at this, I know the print size at times may be a little small because of the kind of report that I pulled it out of. But if you look at AI and big data, technology, all of these networks, cybersecurity, these are skills. But if we come to things like, let's say, resilience, flexibility, and agility as a skill, which are the industries which are going to need more and more of this? And the first one says agriculture, forestry, and fishing. The second is telecom. The third is information technology. The fourth is production of consumer goods. Now, why is resilience, flexibility, and agility required? Think about it. The way we consume goods and services today has rapidly changed. In the last 3 to 4 years, how you buy things has changed. How things are delivered to you has changed. Somebody thought about it. Let's look at some more automobiles. The kind of automobiles that are emerging today are greener. So, a lot of times you will find that these are big shifts that are emerging in these industries. Similarly, you will find more and more shift towards, let's say, creative thinking. Now, where are the shifts in creative thinking and which industry sectors? The first one is insurance. The second is education and training, medical and healthcare, uh, remote medical. I mean, there are robots that you can use now to do surgery in a remote country. That is the level of advancement that's coming in. 5 years back, 6 years back, when I was with IBM, we had built something called Watson, which is really a supercomputer, but it is now helping, let's say, the healthcare system to really identify what a particular disease is and recommend solutions. Now, these are realities that are emerging. And again, let's look at curiosity and lifelong learning. What are the kind of sectors again? So you'll find all of these real estate, information technology. Again, let's look at more skills: leadership, social influence, environmental stewardship. So there is much more. I can share this data, but I wanted to focus very quickly on, let's say, environmental stewardship. Because eventually you will see that a lot of projects that are being brought in schools relate to environmental stewardship. And here, what are the sectors that are expecting these skills in the future? Oil and gas, chemical and advanced materials, agriculture, automobile, mining, supply chain and transportation, because they are also polluting. Now, if you look at it, infrastructure, All of these require a very sharp mindset where anybody coming in is able to think about when a set of actions are taken, how does it impact? That critical thinking, those solutions have to be put in place. And that's the perspective that is emerging, and why elements of design thinking start falling into how the future is shaping up. And that's where you need to see the bigger picture. You may wonder that I need to make a change to a program in a school. And what will this really do? What's the big deal? All I'm trying to showcase here is it is a big deal. You're preparing the talent pool for the future. Uh, the reality also is, and as we talk about talent pools in India, there was a time that India was known to be the most, what should I say, go-to destination for a set of skill sets. Let's say English speaking skills and various other for the ITS sector. A lot of that has got impacted because what industries are saying is that while there is a talent pool available, they do not have relevant industry skills. And that is why the government has started creating sector skill councils. Yet, sector skill councils also have limitations because finally the industry needs to partner. Even when industry partners, people do not come with these mindsets. They do not come with these skill sets and attitudes. That is where schools have to come in. So there is a correlation. Let's start looking at more. So, how will this embedded at school level help? And this is a very interesting chart that I saw in the World Economic Forum report. Um, the quartile that you see, the top right hand quartile, is really what I would like to draw your attention to. And these are skills that are core to organizations already and will continue to become bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, if you look at it, while there are so many, a lot of these are in categories. Just a second. A lot of these are in categories. So let's look at it. Cognitive skills, engagement skills, ethics, management skills, working with others, technology, self efficacy, and physical abilities. Let's leave physical abilities out, but let's start looking at all others. Because if you look at it, you at an education level are building a lot of these. Whether they are cognitive skills, whether they are reinforcing ethics, whether it is working well with each other, whether it's self-efficacy, which is really, self-sufficiency and management. All of these sit somewhere here. Whether it's curiosity, whether it's creative thinking, whether it's leadership and social influence, whether it's resilience or analytical thinking. All of these are core skills for businesses. And that's why what you do today is really helping in the future. So this is a very important data point that I wanted to bring about. With that, let me just stop sharing and Siddhant, please take over.
Yes. And to connect the dots, that what sir was trying to implicate, let's talk about that what key benefits of applying design thinking in classroom will have. So again, the Slido link is in your chat box. You just have to click. We're gonna wait. I think you know the drill then. Lovely. Thank you so much, everyone. So once we reach 20, we're gonna go ahead and start our or activate our quiz, I would say. All right. So let's get started. So I'm activating the quiz, and the question would be in front of your screen. And the options are providing students with fixed answers. And yeah, 20 seconds is up, and feel free to drop your answer. Cool. So again, within big margin, everyone is answering the same, that allowing students to experiment with different ideas and learn from failure. So I think so. We all are on the same page. So what do you?
Sure. No, thanks for that. And it's only a reiteration of what we've learned. so that we can keep moving on this one. Let me just share my. Okay. So, in continuation to our conversation, I think the benefits that we spoke about are two or three. And from a school environment, which is also replicable in a workplace, as I showed you in that data set that we saw mapped very clearly on that graph, are critical thinking and creativity, which is really needed in workplaces for the future. Promoting collaboration, which is working together. And what happens with design thinking is thinking independently, analyzing problems, and looking at things from multiple perspectives. The second is learning to work together. At times, my idea may be very different from yours, but am I willing to try it out? Am I willing to, for a moment, let go of my idea and try something new out? And if it does not work collectively, do everybody else understand that their idea was tried out and now they might have to drop their thought and come back to something that another person had proposed. That's very, very critical in workplaces as well. So most of what you are going to build is going to get replicated in workplaces. The third is encouraging resilience and adaptability. So students learning to embrace failure, as part of the learning process, encourage a growth mindset. And growth mindset is a very interesting analogy. And let me just bring that conversation back. This is specifically from Microsoft, and it's a very small story. Um, it's a large organization, Microsoft, and over a period, what Microsoft realized, and this is also an HBR case study in case you want to refer back to it at some stage and go to Harvard Business Review and look for Microsoft growth mindset. Uh, when Satya Nadella took over Microsoft was struggling as an organization. Honestly, if I asked you why is Microsoft important to you, you would just say MS Office. There would be nothing more that you would actually say from a workplace perspective or from a consumer perspective. Maybe some of them would say cloud. That's it. And that was essentially happening because they had built a way of hiring talent where they would hire from the top engineering schools, top engineering colleges. And over a period, they realized that the environment became very competitive and non collaborative. Everybody was trying to prove they are the best. And that started taking away the agility, the innovation, and the learning that was needed to stay agile in the marketplace. So after Satya Nadella joined and they had a leadership meet and they looked at various things, they looked at their culture and they said, we have to change strategy. In fact, they changed their hiring strategy. Microsoft now does not go to category A engineering colleges at all. They only go to category B and C because they've realized that the hunger to learn, the hunger to collaborate, the hunger to let go, to unlearn is far higher in students that get to these colleges. Why is that? Because there is that curiosity to still learn something, to try out new things. And that has stayed. A lot of times when you become a premier environment, you stop learning. And that's the challenge that they ran into. So there are shifts that have been created in large organizations, and that case study is very, very interesting. The Microsoft case study on the growth mindset. And they used a lot of design thinking in their workplace. Okay, so Siddhant, we'll go back.
Sure. So again, educators, question number 3 is in front of your screen to connect the dots. What we just learned that in the design thinking process, prototyping is primarily intended to. So the link is in the chat box. You just have to jump in and yeah, write down your names. And once we reach 20, we're gonna jump and understand that how much we have, I mean, caught up so far. So yeah, I think we can move ahead with our quiz question that in the design thinking process, prototyping is primarily intended to. The options are in front of your screen with 20 seconds on. All right. So over here we have I would say 60-33, 67-37 ratio. So where few of the educators feel that generating abstract idea without practical application is also one of the primary intention of prototyping. And in majority we are with creating tangible versions of idea to test their viability. So over to
Yeah.
you, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so absolutely, these are relevant scenarios for sure. So, so there are five stages essentially. I think the most important one is about understanding the user and their needs. In fact, it is said that this is the most critical phase of all design thinking. Because if you have not understood the user and their needs, the solutions that you create may not be the most effective, or at times the users may not be able to interpret it. It is also very important that the users acknowledge the fact that this is a real need. And that's where this very fine balance between need identification and at times, you know, and innovators do that. It's a very interesting thing that many times innovators end up creating something. And then they say, well, now that I have created this shiny object, I'm in love with this shiny object. Now, how do I sell it? And they will sell it in any way possible. Whether there is a need or not, they create need through branding, through marketing. But many times, if you reflect back in design thinking here, the element is around building and understanding a real need and then building a solution around. So that's the start point. So if you start relaying it back to uh, start relaying it back to workplace, you're essentially talking about, okay, what can we do in a workplace and in a school? What can we do? How do we help students start empathizing? What are the needs? Now let's look at aspects of, let's say, community. Let's start looking at aspects of, let's say, school itself. um, Students that may not be doing well may drop out. That happens. Communities that are around you may not be able to afford sending some children to school. That's a real problem. Um, the environment around the school may not be very clean and hygienic. That is a real problem. Now, whose problem is it also has to be understood. How do they relate to the problem? Is the problem understood, expressed? A lot of that is part of the empathizing. Then you go into stages of defining what is this problem? Why is it occurring? And defining is again very critical because you got to draw the boundary of the problem. Certain things can be anything. Let's say there is economic disparity, and hence many students or children are not able to get to schools. Now, are you going to start addressing economic disparity as a root cause? Are you going to create a short-term solution which enables these individuals to come to school in spite of economic disparity? Now, where all would you go? So it's important to ring fence the solution. The third is, for example, if you look at ideation, what are the creative solutions around this? And many creative solutions have been found in the past where people have opted to find commit time and various other things. Then the moment you generate creative solutions, you need to start prototyping them and see whether is this tangible or not? Does it work? The idea was fantastic. Whether it's a technical solution, whether it's an applied solution, does it work? For example, if you build a new program or a new course which includes the basic elements of design thinking in how you are teaching, let's say you mix different types of media, you build activities where people are able to think and create. And I know a lot of IB schools are actually driving some of this stuff. The question is, are people getting time to create prototypes, and then are they able to test those out in an environment which is a safe environment for testing. So they try it out. If it works, then we scale it. So these are stages that are defined, and many times you got to keep repeating these to be sure that these really work, and measurement becomes very important. So these are some of the stages that we must understand, that we need to bring in into the study workspace. To enhance empathy, at times we teach empathy maps. Now, what's an empathy map? An empathy map may be able to help somebody understand what stage are they sitting at? Are they clear? What are their challenges? What are they struggling with in terms of real issues? Now, the idea is not to show sympathy. The idea is to look at it from their perspective to say, okay, if this is the challenge, how can I help? What is the solution that will work? The second is, what are the tools to understand users and their needs? Who are the users? For example, at a school level, if you're going to launch, let's say, some project or some initiative around, let's say, the environment, let's take the environment. And it could be pollution, which we all are dealing with, at least in NCR right now, very aggressively. Uh, who are the end users? Whom will it serve? What is the challenge that they are facing? And then what are the problem statements? What is creating this issue today? What are the policies that exist? And that problem statement leads to defining the challenge clearly. What are the policies that already exist? Are they being implemented? Can something be done differently? Do we need to do more around it? Are there a set of people or leaders that we need to influence? All of that starts falling into the defining of the challenge. And then brainstorming the templates as to how will we get this data and information, create the ideas, and there are prototyping guides, which means how do you build a prototype and how do you start testing it out. Also important is when you test it out, how will you capture information that emerges from the testing? How will you use statistical methodologies to capture that data and say, okay, my solution works? And those are very, very important journey maps in this thing as you start building it into education. And there are two, three models that have been used in education. And let me quickly share. The first one is called Carroll et al. Model. It basically has 5 stages, and it says empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test, which is what we've been seeing. There is also a 3 stage model that's been explained interestingly, which says, and this is a little more interesting, it says inspiration. Identify a challenge or an opportunity. Are you inspired to do something? And I've seen this being used a lot more in organizations because A, it is simpler, B, people actually connect with it. So, how do you go and identify a challenge or an opportunity? Are you inspired to solve for it? The second is ideation. And the word ideation actually means you are not judging each other. You're just thinking together. And that also brings in elements of collaboration. The third is implementation, which is really bringing the solution to life. Now, if you look at it, there could be various stages before implementation, but bringing a solution to life is aspirational. If you look at it from a student's perspective, or even a corporate employee perspective, bringing my idea to life is a very exciting thing. What it does to our mind, what the excitement it tends to create when somebody will say, well, bring your solution to life, what do you need for it? And that actually creates the excitement around this. And there is design council, which have 4 stages: discover, define, develop, and deliver. So you could use any one of these, but I've always found the 3 stage model exciting. Of course, we need to guide people through it in terms of how do you get to implementation, what can you do to ideate. Of course, that is needed. Siddhant, we are on slide of four.
On it, sir, on it. So again, team, question number four, and connecting that what we have learned so far, that is in the chat box. That is, how does design thinking help foster creativity in students? So again, I mean, there is a question that how to, I mean, use Slido. So you just have to click on the link, and you can see on the front of the screen itself. You just have to enter your name, and once done, we're going to initiate from here. So let's suppose we have reached 22. So let me go ahead and show you the question. That is, how does design thinking help foster creativity in students? You just have to click the correct answer, and you are good to go. And time's up. With 90% of, I mean, faculty members are with by encouraging exploration and learning from setbacks. So I think we are pretty much inclined, and over to you, sir.
Sure. So, um, just for a quick reflection, um, I hope this is going fine and we are able to relate to some of the conversations. If yes, please do use the chat box, and you could send thumbs up. That also works because then I could, and the pace is okay. I also thought I'll check that am I going too fast or is the pace okay for you? That'll really help. Okay, thanks, Anani ma'am. So anybody else? I mean, please do let me know if the pace is too fast and I'll slow it down. That's not a problem. Okay. So as we come down to how some of these start becoming relevant in our environment, let's understand that we've always said schools are there to build greater creativity and innovation. In fact, schools are getting very, very innovative with discovery spaces, innovation spaces, projects, collaborations with companies. Uh, I mean, hackathons that used to happen in colleges actually happen in schools. There are schools that are teaching coding, and there is so much shift that's emerging. Now, all we are trying to do here is to build citizens for the future that are employable by industries that are growing. That's or they are going to go and create industries that will employ others. It's one of those two. So encouraging out of the box thinking is a very, very thing. But more so, how organizations have started looking at people is, can you challenge existing assumptions? Now, companies and organizations are rule bound, they are policy bound, they are process bound. But when it comes to products and services, they do not want to be tied down into a box. They want employees and colleagues to come in and say, can we do this? Can we try out something new? I believe there is an opportunity here, and those are important conversations that are needed in workplaces. Do we allow that in schools? Today, can a student walk up and say, well, I have a great idea of what can be changed in this school, or there are five things that you can do differently in this school, and I think our learning will go up? Is that an idea box that is kept for employees out there? We may or may not have that. Encouraging exploration of unconventional solutions. What can be done differently? Can we involve students in creating some of these solutions? It could be dropouts, it could be impacting the community, it could be, uh, a particular school may get up and say, yeah, we would love to do this, but we don't have budgets right now. So, what do you think is a creative idea of doing this? And you may find students jumping in and saying, okay, let's look at some repurposement, let's look at some recycling. Can we create something else out of that? And I've seen schools experiment with that. Hands on innovation, engaging them in real world projects. Real world projects around community, workplaces, and even companies. Experiment, iterate. Now, the challenge that we will run into is going to be there in terms of how much time will we get to do this. But in its own little way, can we start building these here? Third is, how are students going to learn from failure? What happens when an experiment or something a student tried out did not work? Is there a process where whatever did not work is reflected back on? Because companies are doing that. When they try something new out, even when in a sales environment, when a bid is lost, a company pulls back everybody together and they sit and reflect back to say, why did we lose this? Where did we go wrong? And that is converted into knowledge management for others to use. How are we converting some of these failures into knowledge management so it gets better? And are we teaching this skill to the students without judging, without fear of reprimand? That's key because otherwise it kills innovation. And that's the same for organizations, by the way. On problem solving and critical thinking, how do you break down a large problem into small, bite sized chunks and start solving? Can you find root causes instead of worrying too much about symptoms? Are we challenging students to say, well, that is a symptom? What's the real issue? Go research, read. A lot of times we have textbooks, but we may not have research built in. We may not encourage research. How do we encourage that to say, okay, get me a contra perspective? User centered solutions. So, what is the user? What is their need? Create solutions that are practical. And there are so many solutions that have emerged. Actually, across the world, you'll find a lot of solutions have emerged because somebody thought of it. The third is it's an iterative process. So, are we testing? Are we giving feedback? We tried something out, it's worked. We tried something out, it's not worked. How do they refine the solution? Is it okay to go refine a solution? This is almost like saying, well, we submitted a project. It's not as nice, and we have three new thoughts now. Can we rework on it and resubmit it to you in a week's time? Are you going to be okay with that? Maybe it comes out nicer. Maybe it comes out really impactful. Those are thoughts that we need to start applying as educators because that's what is needed in the future. That's the real world. So, what are school applications of design thinking? The first one is project based learning, assigning real world challenges. These could be cases with data. You can actually share real data sets to say, if this is an issue, go research and develop a practical solution that they try it out. Community projects. Engage students in local issues. I spoke about that earlier. It builds a sense of responsibility. Subject integration. Now, how can you integrate science and history and art? And in the beginning of the session, I gave you an example that I could integrate maybe engineering skills and people skills to drive performance management. Because engineering skill allowed me to measure data related to machines and manufacturing, input output ratios, wastage. But I could relate those to individuals' performance and how we would want to recognize and reward people. Now, if you look at it, you could say that's arts and the other is science, but you will find that there are correlations. In the workplace, both are important. So we need to bring those in. Um, then research projects. So, are there research projects that you can start picking up and start building? Um, Interdisciplinary collaboration. While you have things merging, can you create projects that are interdisciplinary? That does not really happen. Science students work on science projects, art students work on arts projects. Can you look at interdisciplinary things where you're looking at a larger impact and it requires numbers, it requires budgeting? So you got your people who've taken commerce working on it. It requires certain solutions to be created using science engineering. Maybe you have those people, and it's got a community impact, and hence you have students from, let's say, sociology being involved in that kind of a project. So start thinking in that manner, because the moment you do that, you'll find real world application. Otherwise, all these students, when they do their graduation, most of them end up going into roles where they know only part of the application. And that's the challenge that they hit. Entrepreneurship development, create business solutions, and they may actually need help from other functions. So those are realities that, and I work with a lot of incubators. It's very interesting that even in incubators, startup founders at times struggle. They have created a product. Now they need a good team under them. They need a strong finance person. They need a strong operations person. They need a strong product person. They need a strong marketing person, because they're not all of that. They may emerge from one field. And that's the reality that we need to realize. And are we building some of those capabilities? So there are other pedagogical approaches for implementing this in schools. The first one is, how do you shift from traditional methods? And that's a very important one, an important conversation as well. Uh, how do we bring in more real world problems into the curriculum and start scoring it also? The second is, how do you do theme based learnings? So, how do you create a central theme or a challenge? And you could have various things being then learned around it. Uh, Experimental do and learn approaches, and the word experimental here is key, because some things may work, some may not work. And the fourth is collaborative learning. This again can also be interdisciplinary, as we spoke about in the past slides. So, these are all shifts that are emerging in terms of application. So, I'll share some examples, even in early school stages. So in one of these school, they created an interactive sculpture challenge where fifth graders actually created interactive sculptures within time constraints. And this actually means that once you build a sculpture, you are actually, trying to see, is this good enough? What are the limitations? What can be done? What else can be added? And the other was, these K5 students actually were told to create an empathy based gift for somebody in the family. Now, the word empathy really means knowing the person well and understanding what do they typically need, and then creating that as a gift. And it was very interesting. One of the student actually created a little, using just tin foil, created a little tray, and it looked very beautiful, and they painted it also. And they said, when my dad comes home, he tends to take off his cufflinks and watch, and I thought there'll be a little tray that he can keep on the side, because most times he tends to lose them in the morning, or cufflinks drop off. If you look at it, it's empathy based gift design. It may seem very simple, but the child understands the need of the father and hence created something very simple. So these are all very simple examples. But what we are trying to do and achieve in this is, you're building empathy for the future, so that they understand that when they build solutions, it's relevant for them. So there are some case studies. Uh, so there is one particular school that they created a 3-day design thinking challenge within the school. The data says that 415 students participated and worked on a community problem solving project. It encouraged collaborative innovation and real world impact. The outcomes were that they created practical solutions for local issues, and it increased engagement and a sense of responsibility. Now, somebody may say, is this community service? Sure, it is. But finally, these skills, if you were to reflect back, that we spoke of, the World Economic Forum's skills, it may talk of community impact, it may talk of societal impact, you're talking of collaboration, you're thinking of empathy and critical thinking skills, and you are also relating it to the environmental impact. And you're building all of those skills into this. Also, self-sufficiency, because they are actually contributing and building these solutions up. So all of these mindsets are actually emerging. So again, within the curriculum, if we go a little deeper, because eventually the way we are structured, curriculum may be divided into STEM and humanities and certain others, and applications will differ. But the learning of design thinking has been that interdisciplinary actually becomes very, very powerful. But on an isolated basis, also, it is possible. How do you build design thinking into, let's say, science, technology, engineering, maths projects? So you will find all of that. Within humanities, you may think of social sciences, subjects like, history, languages, culture, all of those aspects are around it. But the moment you start blending them up, the real world solutions actually start emerging. And I shared that example with you that if a community impact project, it will typically use all these three skills or all these three fields. So that's a shift that will help you. Again, continuing, let's go a little deeper. I'd like to go a little deeper, and let's look at each stream in detail. So let's look at STEM education per se. Uh, Here, what you're saying is, okay, go create an innovative product. Define the need. It's very important to identify a need, as we said, and go create an innovative product. It could be an engineering product. What if you improved a process? Let's say the school itself may identify something and say, okay, we need to reduce power utilization by 10%, and you give that project to students. Let them work on it. Let them come back and tell you what's possible. We need to reduce usage of water by X percentage, and these are the liters of that we use. Let students go and explore, but guide them through that process, and then ask them to apply some of those. So those are real projects that you can go and create, which are very practical. The maintenance costs of vehicles that you're using, you're using buses to drop people, and you could say that X number of buses break down. Encourage students to look at that kind of data and say what can be done differently. So there are so many things that you can bring in, and just embed that into STEM. Again, in humanities, if you start looking, uh, empathy, social understanding, cultural and social issues that are emerging. How do you use creative problem solving? Historical events. What is the impact of generations in workplaces? Evaluate that. How can you make some of that work better? How are languages similar? And how can you create solutions where people start understanding other languages better? In all of this, storytelling and narratives can be built in. So there are so many solutions that emerge. But there are challenges. We will always have challenges because it's new. Whenever there is something new and we have to let go of parts of what we are doing, it becomes challenging. There are also governance mechanism, you know, education boards, prescriptive syllabuses that exist, and we need to deliver to that. There are limited number of hours, and teachers would also be actually, uh, you know, uh, converting some of these things. So the question is, how do you actually impact some of that? I think the first biggest issue is there is resistance to change. We all are comfortable doing what we are doing. We've been doing this for years. Over a period, uh, what we are trying to do is, over a period, we've looked at this and we've said, this is how we deliver this program today. This is how I have learned. That process of unlearning and learning these new ways, and again creating little components of these and building these into our day to day education structures is possibly the biggest challenge that sits out today. The second is teacher training needs. We're only having an introduction conversation today, trying to link it to the bigger picture of what are the skills that needed, what are the attitudes that are needed, how can this help. But if you start operationalizing it, you require more training. And the third is time and resources. Who will do it? Where will you find, and if it requires additional time, and you versus unplugging certain activities and plugging these in as replacement, how will you create that time? So these are three very, very important challenges that emerge every time schools start considering implementation or they start building this in. They run into these challenges very, very regularly. Siddhant, let's bring up the fifth one.
Sure. And slide 05, for slide 05, the question is in front of, I mean, in the chat box is that um, which of the following would be the practical way for a teacher to promote design thinking in younger students? So the question is in front of your screen with the respective options, and your timer has started or begun. And with a pretty evitable margin, the answer is pretty evident that by encouraging exploration and learning from setbacks, there's something
Yeah,
which we can use it around. So thank you, educators. Over to you,
yeah,
sir.
thank you. And yeah, that is the most important element as to how do we bake that in? How do we remove our uh, regular ways of working and regular ways of scoring individuals and regular ways of ranking students? A lot of those are dependencies that change in some of those are dependencies for any design thinking element to be brought into the education space. So we in a manner, all of us really need to learn design thinking and start applying that to how we have constructed or how we've built our systems and see where is the opportunity, which are the places that we can build this in, because the need is evident. The need, the end user need, is what I started sharing with you. And if you go to understand your customer, the customer here is not just the student. The user here is not just the student. It is the eventual employer of that talent, and you're creating talent. That employer is globally now stating that these are the mindsets that I need to be relevant in the future. So that's the end customer. How are you understanding it? Then it comes down to, okay, your direct people that you directly impact, are they ready for these skills? What are the opportunities that you create for them? So that's the lens that we will have to start applying. So in all of this, our learning and learnings have been that please don't worry about starting small. You don't have to go and do a Big Bang theory or a Big Bang application and say, starting tomorrow, our school is design thinking certified or whatever, and everything that we do has got design thinking. We don't need to do that. Look at small opportunities and say, where can we start embedding some of these models, some of these approaches, and start small? In the same way that all change and innovation gets replied in design thinking, which is understanding the need, scoping out the change and the problem, prototype, creating the ideas, prototyping it, testing it. Please follow through all those steps, even in this change that you bring in through small projects. See how it's working, and then bring in progressively complex tasks into the learning. So it has to be built on success, but it does not mean that you will succeed all the time. You will hit success once you're following design thinking concepts to say, okay, what did we learn from this failure? And then we go back to our ideation and continue to apply. Reflect and feedback, very important, because that's the element that builds resilience, builds creativity, builds that ability to constantly unlearn and learn, which is important. And encourage students to reflect on their learnings. Every situation has a learning. Again, there are opportunities. Why is this an opportunity? Because this creates empowerment. They are taking ownership of their own learning. It's interesting, it's fun, it's non-judgmental, and it allows us to develop our leadership and initiative skills. Real world things. The moment I see a real world problem solved, I take pride in it. I carry that back. I grow. Bridging the gap between theory and practice. Right set of theories, but how do we see that in action? We spoke of application in STEM. A lot of that can actually be applied in practice. And students can see that between what I learned and I tried applying some solutions, it worked. And as we said, intersectional, streams, how can they work together? The idea is to prepare them for future careers. And the careers are going to emerge from those skills that we spoke about right in the beginning. So, what are the systemic recommendations? The first systemic recommendation is skill educators on design thinking. Go deeper and teach them the methodologies and the school so that they can talk about it. I remember, and these are basic shifts. The second is flexible curriculum models. How do we create more flexibility? How do we embed that into existing subjects? How do we create cross-cultural, cross-curricular projects? And the third is engage the stakeholders. Stakeholders are parents, administrators, local communities, on. All of these are your stakeholders. How do you engage them so that you are able to build a collaborative learning environment? All of these are systemic changes, which means they will take time if we start walking this path. And secondly, create a culture. What is the culture of innovation in that school? Are you encouraging curiosity and questioning? Or do we say, well, that's too many questions and there are too many students? How many can we answer? Can we funnel all those questions into a little chatbot? Go and ask students, hey, start tracking what kind of questions come in this subject. Convert that. Let's put answers there so that you can access it on your own. Promote a mindset, exploring. Reward those creative efforts. Sure, you're recognizing grades and sure, you're recognizing achievements. Please start recognizing innovation. Innovation in application of these new ideas. And again, build resilience. What happens after failure is a very important conversation. So that's going to be very critical from a design perspective. Of course, there are innovative techniques, storytelling, scenario building, narratives, role playing, simulations, games. There are lots of games that have emerged. But introduce it through fun, engaging tasks. That's important. It should not become one more subject that a student goes back and says, oh, shucks, I've got now a new subject sitting on my head called design thinking. And I'm so overwhelmed with what I have already. It's gently embedded into how they're doing what they're learning. So, how do you ensure success? How can you measure you're successful? How engaged are students in doing those activities is a very simple measure. The level of participation, interest, the hunger that with the student comes and says, hey, I tried something out new, ma'am or sir, and would you want to look at it? Or I tried something else. I know you taught me this, but I tried something else. I think it worked, but I'm stuck here. That's an innovative way. Maybe that solution will fail, but are you willing to give time to that? So that's the originality of the solution. And again, if you move forward, problem solving skills. How are they solving problems? Are they getting overwhelmed with the problem? Or are they now able to break the problem into smaller things and actually start solving in the work in the and and these are essentially, if you look at it, these are the same skills which are needed for the 21st century: critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, communication. So it's no different. And I want to share four or five business related environment examples with you in terms of how organizations have used design thinking, because eventually the talent that you're producing goes and works in organizations, and there are people sitting there who are thinking in that manner. So the first one we want to talk about is Nike. And what Nike did was that they empathized with the athlete's need. So they involve athletes in its design process of the shoe, and they address the performance needs and comfort. In fact, for many athletes, the shoes are created bespoke and not just to functionality but to cultural nuances of various global communities. And culturally, these things are different. They also do prototyping. So, one example is that they have a Flynet racer. That's one of the model. It went through 195 iterations in the design. That is a level of perfection they like to bring in. So they will try and error. And no, the people who tried that 195 times did not get sacked. They were not fired. They were trying to perfect it. And that's the key learning. How do you do user-centric innovation? So it it allows for brand loyalty. Some of the best athletes in the world actually trust Nike when they have to perform. Let's look at Airbnb. Many of you would have used Airbnbs or tried it out. How do they build trust? And there is no science here. This is lack of trust. This is not a STEM experiment. This is a psychology experiment. This is a sociology experiment. And if you take this to the school again, are you not uncomfortable going and staying in somebody else's house? It's their home. And there could be strangers staying there in another room. So that was a very big challenge. Lack of trust in staying with strangers. But that's their product, right? So they prioritized empathy through user research, like host message prompts, enhancing user trust. So the innovative solution, and I've tried out Airbnb when I've traveled globally also. I mean, you go on to Airbnb and the homeowners are actually talking to you. They're asking you questions. I have gone and asked questions like, we'll be carrying three very heavy bags. And how's your house? I mean, do you have a lift? Are these apartments? And I was told, no, no, no. It's an individual house. There are staircases. You'll have to keep your bags in the ground floor. But the particular bedroom or the washroom is on the top floor. Would it be convenient for you? That level of interaction, if you can have, understand the kind of empathy that is getting created in that conversation. So hosts are improving the property listings just because of that. So people like me would give a great rating to a host who's actually asking me and enabling me in those questions. So it is empathy driven innovation and very hands on engagement with users. So if you use the app, you'll realize how powerful it is. Let's look at the third one, Netflix. We all watch Netflix and we spend a lot of time. What is Netflix doing? How are they using design thinking in a workplace? And many of your students will eventually go into media, programming, content creation. Those are the kind of jobs that are there for the future. Actually, the future, this is much bigger. It wasn't as big a few years back. So there are data-driven innovations. For example, they use user data to improve the platform. You're looking for something, you're watching a movie, it asks you, did you like it? And you say yes. It gives you three more options which are similar and says, hey, these are similar genres that are existing. Would you like to see this? Then you have a feature called skip intro. And let me ask you, how many of you use skip intro? I would say most of us, because we do not have the patience to watch the intro of every series all the time. Why was that created? Because once you're binge watching, you don't need to see the intro again and again. It's really meant for when you restart because it allows you to refresh the previous, uh, sequel that you saw. So just that little bit, because people would start forwarding it and they noticed that people start forwarding it. So they created skip intro. It's such a simple thing, so powerful. Decision fatigue, shuffle button. So you are able to shuffle and it is spontaneous. You are able to move forward. I think the learning here is you got to try things out. And I work in the disability inclusion space, and it's very interesting. So I was working with a large IT player, and we were trying to create normalized conversations between employees who are persons with disabilities and employees who are non-disabled. And one of the employee got up and said, a person with disability, a vision impaired person, actually said, "I enjoy watching Netflix," and we were creating conversations which are normal things that happen. And the other people looked very surprised. Said, "How do you watch?" Because they knew the person is visually impaired. And she turned around and said, "Well, there are screen readers now available, and when I'm watching, I'm listening. And when I'm listening, that is what watching means to me. I'm able to sense the feelings behind it, the expression behind it, and that's how I watch." But there was a speech and hearing impaired person who said, "I also enjoy watching Netflix, and I can read everything that's being said, and I can see what's happening on screen." Now, that was built for persons with disabilities. But what did it do? It brought global and regional content to your TV screen. You can watch a Tamil or a Malayalam or an English or a French movie tomorrow and still enjoy it. It was not built for you, but it got expanded, and suddenly you have so much more content. Consider this. So, again, if you look at GE, and this is a very interesting one, GE Healthcare realized that children were very uncomfortable in MRI machines. You want to lie down, they're restless, it's uncomfortable. So, the GE Healthcare's chief designer observed that they feared undergoing an MRI. And what he did was, MRI machines were transformed into themed environments. Imagine an MRI machine that looks like a pirate ship or space adventure. So the child lying in that machine is actually looking at that and imagining the stars and the ships and all of that. So you create user centric design solutions. It's a very simple thought, but extremely powerful. So again, why is this relevant? And there is more. Google does this. Uh, Google did this for children, youngsters. Google teaches coding, and they made coding tangible. And they have a project called Project Blocks. So they have a physical modular system to teach children the concept of coding. And these are physical, tactile, link, uh, modules. And children are able to connect these and understand that based on this, they will be able to code or not code. So these are some of my learnings and research, and I wanted to bring out. In the end, there is only one little thing that I want to share. Um, and this is true for all of us. It's not just about the education system or schools or teachers. It's for all of us uh, in the learning industry, in the training industry, in the leadership industry, in schools, in every environment. If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So you got to choose your uncomfortable. That's where I would like to end the session and come back to the session. So back to you.
Sandeep ji, I just want to give a standing ovation the way you have portrayed, because you are a corporate trainer and ऐसा लगा ही नहीं कि आप जो है you I have never been into this education, and the kind of connect you have made, very powerful, amazing, amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, too
So
good.
thank you so much. I think the point is that if you are aware of what's happening out there in terms of future skills, you'll be
Mhm.
able to relate to it much better. And because I'm working with a bunch of incubators also, I am working with a set of school promoters as well, very extensively.
Mhm.
And over a period, what I've realized is that so the other day I was with these promoters, and this conversation was around how do we build inclusion into our workplace. And the standard things are into the school. And the standard things are all there, right? You have a ramp, you have a lift, a wheelchair can go in and all of that. And I work in that space. We started going deeper, and then we realized maybe we haven't thought of a set of things, in terms of how you would apply uh, teaching methodologies, training methodologies. There is so much that exists. There is so much technology that exists. And interestingly, other side, organizations are also talking the same. I was talking to a large IT company the other day, and they said, "Oh, we've got this employee who's got muscular dystrophy, and initially the person could work, but now they can only move eyes. So we've gone and invested in a technology where they can use their eyes and move the eyeballs, and they are able to move content on the screen." The fact is, how many companies will make that effort? Very few. They're all large global players.
Yes.
But the fact is not that. The issue is, do we all know that exists? And somebody went and created it. That's the point.
Yes.
So you got to correlate all of this. And the ability to correlate all of this and seek solutions is really the essence of design thinking. I mean, honestly, that's where it is.
And I would like to say that environment, the discussion in environment, but in school regarding environment is taken very lightly at times, because since this is not the main subject, and the teachers are also not worried about the kind of impact we could see, but how we are incubating the student to focus on this kind of problem and design the things about it, somewhere or the other we teachers need to work upon. And obviously we do go to different schools, and we have seen already teachers every time they decorate the classes, they have that ability to design the thinking, to apply this design thinking in their classes. But yes, now they are more focused about creating and making the student to think in this line. Too good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like there are schools which are asking students to say, okay, this is the amount of food wastage we have in the cafeteria. How can we reduce it? That's something students are working on.
Yes.
They are going and figuring it out. Instead of the school administrator or headmistress or the principal fretting about it. That's a whole project which has got data, it's got observation, it's got sociology. If you start looking at it, is all of that embedded in that. Provided we put those lenses there and say, okay, this is a multidisciplinary project where we will have students from all these three programs coming and looking at it and find a practical solution.
I
So
agree.
there are so many of these that you can just build up.
Yes. So teachers, this way the student become also empathetic toward the thing that they are already doing without any having any sense, and they become more sensible about the environment and so many other things. And obviously the kind of respect we as a teacher want from the student, it will increase definitely when you are creative. The student give more respect to that those teachers who think differently from what the most of the teachers are thinking. So. Thank you, Sandeep ji. It was too good and
So
definitely
much.
helpful.
Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you so much to everybody for the participation. Grateful for the opportunity, and let's stay connected. If there's any other way that I can help, please do let.